Good evening, dear listeners. The clock ticks away the moments, marking the inexorable passage from the comforting light of day into the encroaching, heavy shadows of night. Outside, perhaps the wind howls a mournful dirge, a lament carried on the currents of the air, or the rain whispers secrets, soft and insistent, against your windowpane. Or perhaps it is merely the oppressive silence, thick and heavy, that presses in on you from all sides, promising something undefined, something yet to be revealed. Tonight, we gather here, not around a flickering campfire under a vast canopy of stars, sharing warmth and camaraderie, but in the quiet, profound solitude of our own personal spaces, connected by the shared, primal thrill of venturing into the unknown. We journey now into tales that will disturb your peace, stretching the hours into an eternity of anticipation, and filling the darkness with whispers of dread that only you, in your deepest thoughts, can truly hear. For there are stories that yearn to be told, to crawl forth from the deepest, most forgotten corners of ancient folklore, from the chilling annals of modern urban myth, and from the terrifying, unsettling truths of real encounters that linger just beyond the thin veil of all everyday understanding. These are not merely tales to be seen, to be passively observed, but to be felt, to be absorbed into the very fabric of your being, to resonate within the hidden, most vulnerable chambers of your own mind. Tonight, your imagination is the vast, limitless canvas upon which these horrors will be painted, your very thoughts, the brushstrokes that bring them to vivid, terrifying life. So, find a comfortable spot, perhaps dim the lights to enhance the atmosphere, or allow the natural darkness to envelop you completely. Close your eyes, if you dare to surrender to the experience, and let the sounds guide you. Let the narratives unfold, one by one, each meticulously designed to peel back a layer of your certainty, leaving you exposed to the unsettling possibilities of the world and the chilling whispers that reside deep within. Are you ready? For once we begin this descent, there is no turning back. The night is long, stretched out before us, and the stories, they are many, waiting to be heard. The echoes of Hollow Manor, in the deepest heart of the countryside, nestled amidst gnarled ancient oaks whose branches twisted like arthritic fingers, and swallowed by creeping ivy that clung to its stone facade like a second skin, stood Hollow Manor. For decades, it had remained a brooding, desolate landmark, its vacant windows like empty eyes, staring out onto a world that had long forgotten its existence. Its history was shrouded in impenetrable mystery, tales of unspeakable tragedy, and inexplicable disappearances clinging to its very stones like damp, pervasive moss. Emily, a brilliant historian with a profound fascination for the macabre and a distinct penchant for forgotten lore, saw not a derelict ruin, but a treasure trove of untold stories, a historical puzzle waiting to be solved. Armed with her trusty recorder, her meticulous notes, and a spirit bordering on reckless curiosity, she sought to document the manor's shadowed past, to uncover the chilling truth behind the whispers that locals still exchanged in hushed, fearful tones. She had been warned, of course. Old Mr. Abernathy, who lived in the nearest isolated village, had clasped her arm with a surprisingly strong grip, his eyes wide with genuine, unfeigned fear. "Don't go there, lass. The air ain't right." Voices, they echo through those halls, a chorus of the lost. Shadows, they move on their own accord, shifting and twisting into impossible forms. Emily had smiled politely, dismissing his words as the superstitious ramblings of the elderly. She would soon learn the profound folly of her youthful bravado. Her first night in the grand, dust-shrouded bedroom felt like stepping into a cold, ancient tomb. The silence was profound, almost suffocating, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves outside and the occasional deep groan of the old house settling, as if sighing in its sleep. But as midnight approached, a peculiar, unnatural chill descended. It wasn't merely the dampness of the old stones. It was a biting, unnatural cold that seemed to seep into her very bones, stealing the warmth from the air, making her shiver uncontrollably. The thermometer she'd brought, a precise instrument, plummeted several degrees in a matter of minutes. Then the whispers began. At first, she thought it was merely the wind playing cruel tricks with the ancient chimney. But no, these were distinct, though utterly unintelligible, murmurs. They seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the house, from the solid walls, the creaking floorboards, the high ceiling. They were filled with an unbearable sorrow, a deep, pervasive grief that twisted her stomach into knots, a feeling of profound loss. Driven by a historian's innate instinct, or perhaps by a foolish, irresistible fascination, Emily clutched her recorder tightly and moved towards the source of the sound. It seemed strongest from below, drawing her deeper into the manor's secrets. She descended the grand, creaking staircase, each step a loud protest against the oppressive quiet. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into what sounded like agonized whimpers and choked sobs, though still no discernible words, just raw emotion. They led her to the darkest corner of the basement, a section she hadn't even noticed during her thorough daytime survey. There, obscured by decades of thick cobwebs and accumulated debris, was a narrow, hidden door. It was old, heavy, made of dark, rough-hewn wood, and conspicuously without a visible handle. Hesitantly, Emily pushed against it. To her profound surprise, it swung inward with a low, grating groan, revealing a small, musty room previously unknown, a forgotten chamber. Inside, piled haphazardly, were old, decaying furniture and a single, ornate mirror, its once gilded frame tarnished and peeling, its surface clouded with the accumulated dust and grime of ages. Emily stepped inside, the air growing colder still, thick with the cloying scent of dust and something else. Something metallic and old, like stagnant blood, a smell that prickled her nose and sent shivers down her spine. As she approached the mirror, she saw not her own reflection, but a chilling scene from the past. A family stood before it, their faces etched with unspeakable fear, their eyes wide with terror, their expressions frozen in time. They seemed to be looking at something just out of Emily's view, something horrifying. Suddenly, the father figure in the reflection, a man with a wild, desperate look in his eyes, pointed a trembling finger directly at Emily. His mouth moved, forming words she couldn't hear, his lips contorting into a silent, agonizing scream. A primal dread seized Emily, gripping her heart in an icy vice. This wasn't a mere reflection. It was a window, a terrifying portal, and they, the trapped souls of the past, could see her. The room around her began to shake violently, dust raining down from the ceiling in thick clouds. The whispers exploded into a cacophony of agonizing screams and desperate pleas, filling the small space, deafening her with their intensity. The mirror's surface rippled, distorting like disturbed water, the faces within twisting into monstrous caricatures of despair. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, desperate drumbeat against the escalating horror. She knew, with chilling certainty, that whatever happened to that family, she was witnessing the very moment of their despair, their final torment, and she was next. With a desperate, guttural cry, Emily stumbled backward, tripping over unseen objects in her blind panic, scrambling wildly towards the hidden door. She yanked it open, her fingers raw and bleeding from the effort, and burst out into the relative safety of the basement, gasping for breath, her lungs burning with the stale, dust-filled air. She fled the manor, leaving her research, her valuable equipment, and every shred of her scientific skepticism behind, forever altered. The cries of the past still echoed in her ears for weeks, a persistent phantom torment. To this day, Hollow Manor remains untouched, its dark secrets locked away within its walls, echoing through time, waiting patiently for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble upon its hidden horrors. And Emily? She never returned to the countryside, haunted by the pervasive fear that one day she might see her own reflection pointing back from the mirror of Hollow Manor, trapped forever. The Midnight Caller. Jake lived alone in a small, slightly run-down apartment on the 4th floor of an old, forgotten building. His nights were often spent in profound solitude, the quiet broken only by the distant, muffled city hum and the occasional creak of the building. He worked long, demanding hours, and by the time he got home, exhaustion usually claimed him, pulling him into a deep, dreamless sleep. But one evening, as the clock on his bedside table clicked past midnight, his landline phone, an old rotary model he kept for sentimental reasons, began to ring. He picked it up, half asleep, groggy and disoriented, expecting a wrong number or perhaps a late-night call from a colleague. "Hello," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. Silence. A heavy, absolute silence stretched across the line, broken only by a faint, almost imperceptible, distorted whisper, like wind rustling through dead leaves. It sounded distinctly like his name. Jake. He frowned, shaking his head to clear the fog. "Hello? Who is this?" No response. Assuming it was a prank call or perhaps a faulty connection on the old line, he muttered, "Wrong number," and hung up with a decisive click. But the calls persisted. Every night, the same time, as the clock struck precisely 12, he tried unplugging the phone, pulling the cord from the wall, but it still rang, an impossible, phantom chime echoing through his apartment, defying logic. He even tried leaving it off the hook, but the sound, though fainter, still permeated the air, a maddening, persistent hum that burrowed into his skull, driving him to distraction. The voice, too, began to change. With each passing night, it grew clearer, more insistent, shedding its distortion. It started with just his name, but soon it began recounting intimate details of his life. Jake, you forgot your keys on the counter this morning. Jake, you had pizza for dinner, didn't you? Jake, the old photograph of your mother. It's still on your desk, isn't it? Chillingly accurate details. Things no one else could possibly know. Panic began to set in. A cold, creeping tendril of fear that wrapped around his heart, squeezing it tight. He contacted the phone company, desperate for an explanation. They checked his records, ran extensive diagnostics. "Mr. Harrison," the technician had said, his voice flat, "there's no record of any calls to your number during those times. No incoming, no outgoing. Your line is perfectly clear." This only deepened Jake's dread. If the calls weren't coming from an external line, from the outside world, where were they coming from? Who was making them? And how did they know so much about his private life? He started bolting his doors, double-checking the locks, checking his windows repeatedly, sleeping with a knife under his pillow for a semblance of security. He installed cameras, but they showed nothing but an empty apartment, a silent, still space. Yet, every night, precisely at midnight, the phone would ring. One particularly stormy night, the rain lashing against his window with violent force and thunder rattling the panes of glass, Jake, fueled by sleepless nights and a burgeoning sense of madness, decided he wouldn't hang up. He wouldn't ignore it. He would confront it, face the source of his torment. He waited, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, his hand trembling uncontrollably as it hovered over the receiver. As the clock struck 12, the phone rang, a deafening shriek in the quiet apartment. He snatched it up, his voice hoarse, raw with fear and desperation, demanding, "Who is this? What do you want?" The voice on the other end was no longer distorted. It was clear, deep, resonant, and eerily familiar. It was his own voice. "I'm closer than you think," it whispered, the words slithering into his ear, twisting his sanity, shattering his last vestiges of composure. A sudden, unnatural cold swept through the room, chilling him to the bone, raising goosebumps on his arms. The air grew heavy, thick with a palpable, oppressive presence. He felt it, a cold breath on the back of his neck, a subtle, disturbing shift in the air directly behind him. The phone slipped from his numb fingers, clattering to the floor with a dull thud. Slowly, agonizingly, Jake turned. He faced the darkness, the empty space behind his armchair. There was nothing there. Only the oppressive void, a suffocating emptiness. But the cold remained. The feeling of being watched, consumed, was overwhelming. He realized, with a horrifying clarity that pierced his very soul, that some calls are better left unanswered. Because sometimes the call isn't coming from outside the house, it's coming from within. And it's already there, waiting. The Watcher in the Woods. Lena had always been deeply drawn to the profound tranquility of the forest. When she moved to her new home, a quaint cottage nestled on the very edge of a sprawling, ancient woodland, she found immediate solace in its silent, embracing presence. Daily walks became her sacred ritual, a cherished way to clear her mind, to escape the lingering anxieties and pressures of city life. The towering trees, their canopies forming a majestic cathedral, the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves, the rich scent of pine and damp earth. It was her sanctuary, her personal refuge. One crisp autumn afternoon, as she ventured deeper than usual along a seldom-used deer trail, a path barely visible, she noticed a figure among the trees. It was indistinct at first, almost part of the shifting shadows, blending seamlessly with the environment. But as she squinted, she made out the form of a man. He was standing perfectly still, unnaturally rigid, partially obscured by a thick, ancient oak. He wasn't walking, wasn't moving, wasn't engaged in any activity. He was just watching her. A shiver, not from the cold autumn air, but from an internal dread, ran down her spine. Unnerved, she quickened her pace, her heart beginning to thump a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't dare look back, but the pervasive feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes piercing her back, lingered like a cold, phantom touch on her skin. She told herself it was just a hiker, taking a rest. But hikers moved. They acknowledged others. This man had been a statue, unnervingly still. Days turned into weeks, and the figure appeared more frequently. Always at a distance, always silent, always watching. Sometimes she'd only catch a fleeting glimpse, a flicker of movement from the extreme corner of her eye, but the presence was undeniable, a constant, unsettling companion. It was never the same spot, but always just within her peripheral vision, just beyond clear, definitive sight. The figure began to consume her thoughts, eroding her peace. She found herself constantly scanning the tree line, anticipating, dreading its appearance. Her peaceful, restorative walks became anxious, hurried treks. She confided in her neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who had lived in the village her entire life, a repository of local lore. Mrs. Thompson's face paled visibly as Lena described the figure. "Child," she whispered, her voice tight with an old, deeply ingrained fear. "You must stay away from those woods after dusk. Years ago, a man went missing in those very woods. John Hemlock. They searched for weeks, but his body was never found. The locals, they say his spirit lingers, watching, waiting, forever." The story chilled Lena to the bone, a cold dread seeping into her very core. A missing man, a watchful, silent spirit. It fit perfectly. The figure was always silent, always still, always there, determined to confront her fears, or perhaps to simply break free from the suffocating paranoia that was consuming her. Lena decided she would go back. Not during the day, not when it was safe and bright, but at dusk. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and bleeding orange. Casting long, distorted shadows, Lena re-entered the woods, a profound sense of trepidation accompanying her. The air grew heavy, thick with an unnatural stillness that pressed in on her. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Every shadow stretched and twisted, taking on grotesque, menacing forms in the fading light. She walked slowly, deliberately, her senses on high alert, every nerve ending screaming. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming now, a physical pressure on her skin, a tangible presence. Then he emerged, closer than ever before, standing directly on the path, barely 20 feet ahead. It was a man, tall and gaunt, dressed in dark, worn clothing that seemed to absorb the light. His face was completely obscured by shadow, a featureless void, but she could feel his eyes on her, a cold, empty stare that stole her breath, freezing her in place. He made no sound, no movement, just stood there, a silent sentinel of the encroaching night, an unmoving statue of dread. Summoning every ounce of courage she possessed, every last shred of her resolve, Lena's voice cracked as she spoke, a fragile sound in the vast silence. "Who are you?" The figure remained silent, motionless. But then, slowly, agonizingly slowly, he raised an arm. A skeletal finger, long and thin, pointed directly behind her. Lena's blood ran cold, turning to ice in her veins. She knew, she absolutely knew, with a primal, instinctual certainty, that the figure in front of her was not the one she should fear. The true terror was behind her, the one that had been watching her, following her, all along, the one that the silent watcher was warning her about. Without a second thought, without daring to look back, Lena turned and ran. She ran with a desperate, raw energy she didn't know she possessed, her lungs burning, her legs pumping, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The familiar scent of damp earth and pine needles now felt suffocating, each branch that whipped past her face a stinging reminder of her desperate flight. The forest, once her sanctuary, had transformed into a labyrinth of menacing shadows and unseen threats. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, every distant hoot of an owl, becoming a terrifying confirmation that something was gaining on her, something unseen, something predatory. She could feel its presence, a cold, suffocating dread pressing in on her from all sides, a palpable weight on her back, a chilling certainty that the very air around her was now tainted by its unseen pursuit. She burst out of the tree line, stumbling onto the familiar paved road leading to her cottage, gasping for air, her body trembling uncontrollably. Her muscles screamed in protest, but a deeper, more primal instinct propelled her forward. She didn't stop until she was inside. The door slammed shut with a final echoing thud, locked and bolted, her back pressed against the cold wood, tears streaming down her face, mingling with the sweat and grime. She peered through the peephole, her breath fogging the glass, her vision blurring. The road was empty. The forest stood silent, dark, and menacing, its secrets once again swallowed by the night, an impenetrable wall of shadow that seemed to mock her fragile sense of security. Lena never returned to the woods. The cottage, once a haven of peace and solitude, now felt like a fragile, vulnerable shell, a thin barrier against the encroaching darkness. Every night, she double-checked the locks, not once, but repeatedly, her fingers tracing the cold metal as if to reassure herself of their strength. She drew the curtains tight, blocking out not just the moonlight, but the very idea of the outside world. She slept with the lights on, the artificial glow a meager defense against the terrors that now populated her mind. She knew, deep in her soul, with an unsettling clarity, that the watcher in the woods had saved her, had given her a warning. But she also knew that whatever he was warning her about, whatever truly lurked in the depths of that ancient forest, was still out there, waiting. And sometimes, when the wind howled just right, or the shadows danced in a peculiar way on her walls, she could almost hear that faint, high-pitched whistle. No longer a warning, but a chilling reminder that some things, once seen, can never be unseen, and some fears, once awakened, can never truly be put to rest, becoming permanent residents in the deepest chambers of the mind. And so, dear listeners, as the final echoes of these tales begin to fade, and the long, disturbing night slowly yields to the first tentative hints of dawn, we find ourselves once again in the quiet solitude of our own spaces. But are we truly alone? Or have these stories, these whispers from the dark corners of existence, left an indelible mark upon your perception of the world, subtly reshaping the contours of your reality? The human mind, in its infinite complexity, possesses an extraordinary capacity for both wonder and terror. It is a canvas upon which the most vivid nightmares can be painted with chilling detail, a stage where the most profound fears can play out with terrifying realism, often far more potent than any external threat. Tonight, we have merely provided the brushstrokes, the subtle suggestions, the atmospheric sounds, allowing your own imagination, that boundless and often treacherous landscape, to conjure the true horrors, to fill in the terrifying blanks with the very essence of your deepest anxieties. For the most potent fears are often those that remain unseen, those that lurk just beyond the veil of our understanding, taking amorphous shape in the deepest, most vulnerable recesses of our minds, fed by our own primal instincts. Remember, the world is vast and ancient, filled with mysteries that defy logical explanation, with shadows that dance just beyond the reach of our comprehension, hinting at realities far stranger than fiction. There are places where the past refuses to die, where the echoes of tragedy linger, waiting for an unsuspecting ear to tune into their frequency. There are voices that call from beyond the known, seeking connection, or perhaps something far more sinister, something that seeks to unravel the very fabric of our sanity. And there are entities, both human and otherwise, that watch from the periphery, their intentions unknown, their presence a chilling reminder of our own fragile mortality, of the thin veneer of civilization that separates us from the primal unknown. Perhaps, as you drift off to sleep, or as you continue with your night, you might find yourself listening a little more closely to the creaks and groans of your own home. Sounds once mundane, now imbued with a new, unsettling significance. Perhaps the shadows in your room will seem a little deeper, a little more alive, shifting with an unseen purpose. Perhaps the silence will feel a little heavier, pregnant with unseen possibilities. A canvas for the mind to project its deepest anxieties upon. This is the true power of these stories, not merely to entertain, but to awaken, to remind us that the line between the ordinary and the extraordinary, between the safe and the terrifying, is often far thinner than we dare to imagine, a permeable membrane that can be breached at any moment. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of darkness. May your night be long, may your thoughts be disturbing, and may the frightful whispers of the unknown linger just long enough to remind you of the thrilling, terrifying beauty of fear itself, a fundamental part of the human experience. Until next time, when the shadows lengthen and the stories call once more, stay safe and always, always keep listening.